At 72, in the quiet final stretch of a life built on obsession, strategy, and unrelenting control, George Allen finally let slip the truths that had followed him like shadows across every sideline he ever commanded. To the world, he was the mastermind who refused to waste a second, the coach who slept in his office, the architect of defenses that felt like storms rolling across the field. Yet behind that carefully crafted order lived a man shaped by rivalries, betrayals, and secrets that the NFL chose not to revisit for decades. Allen was not simply a coach. He was a force of nature, a man who believed that winning was a moral obligation, that preparation was a form of religion, and that trust was a currency too valuable to hand out freely. For years, people around him whispered about the grudges he carried, the players he pushed past their limits, the owners he clashed with, the assistants who feared his intensity more than opposing quarterbacks ever did. Now, long after his final whistle, the 5 hidden truths that defined him have resurfaced. They explain why he fought so hard, why he made enemies in every building he entered, and why the league never fully embraced the man who reshaped modern football. What drove George Allen to live in conflict with the very sport he elevated? What secrets sat beneath the victories and the iron discipline? If you want to understand a legend, stay with this story. It finally reveals the truths he never escaped. Before the secrets took shape and before the grudges hardened into a permanent part of his reputation, George Allen was a young assistant who saw football not as a game, but as a grand puzzle, waiting for the person who cared enough to solve it. He believed the sport rewarded discipline more than talent, and that preparation could erase nearly any disadvantage. While others admired flair or improvisation, Allen admired precision. He admired order. He admired the beauty of a team that moved as if guided by a single mind. He rose through the coaching ranks during a turbulent era when the NFL was shifting from a bruising regional pastime into a national spectacle. The league was hungry for innovation. Coaches were fighting to define new identities for their teams. Owners were searching for men who could bring stability to a sport growing faster than any of them expected. Into that world stepped Allen, a man with a notebook always in hand and a philosophy that startled even veterans who had spent decades on the sideline. His early years with the Rams showed just how different he was. Instead of leaning on established systems, he rebuilt defenses piece by piece, treating every detail like a battlefield decision. Players noticed his intensity immediately. Some admired it. Others feared it. Many had never seen a coach who demanded so much from every snap of practice. Allen believed that greatness did not come from talent alone. He believed greatness was the result of repetition and mental sharpness. To him, every drill mattered, every meeting mattered, every second mattered. When he moved to Washington, his legend began to solidify. The over-the-hill gang took shape under his strict command. Veterans who had been cast aside elsewhere found new purpose under a coach who valued their experience and discipline. The team reflected his identity: tough, precise, relentless. They played as if each down carried the weight of a season. Fans admired the transformation. Opponents respected it. Yet beneath the success lived a constant tension. Allen pushed everyone around him to their limits, and he accepted no compromise on preparation or loyalty. These traits made him a revolutionary figure. They also made him a magnet for conflict. Owners struggled with his unyielding control over roster decisions. Assistants learned that disagreement with him often carried consequences. Players understood that once trust broke, it rarely returned. Allen created winning teams, but he also created friction. His methods reshaped the NFL, but they came with personal costs that followed him through every chapter of his career. To understand the 5 hidden truths behind his rise, one must first understand the man who believed preparation was life, that discipline was salvation, and that the game belonged to those willing to sacrifice everything for order. The deeper one looks, the clearer it becomes that George Allen's story was never just about football. It was about the price a man pays when he builds greatness on foundations of obsession. Dan Reeves was not the kind of owner who stepped aside lightly. He believed in hierarchy. He believed in tradition. Above all, he believed that the owner must sit at the top of every decision seen and unseen. When George Allen entered the Los Angeles Rams organization, Reeves expected another bright assistant who would follow orders and respect boundaries. Instead, he found a rising coach whose ambition matched his own and whose philosophy threatened the structure Reeves had spent decades defending. At first, the tension was subtle. Reeves admired Allen's intelligence and his relentless preparation. Their early conversations were professional and even friendly. Yet beneath the surface, a quiet unease grew. Allen was not simply coaching a defense. He was building a culture. He was shaping a team identity that felt separate from the owner's influence. In an era when few assistants dared to challenge authority, Allen acted with unusual independence. Reeves noticed, and he did not forget. The conflict deepened once Allen became head coach. He wanted full control over roster choices. He wanted veterans who fit his system rather than younger players the front office preferred to develop. He believed experience offered reliability, and he refused to compromise on his vision. Reeves saw these decisions as intrusions into territory he considered his own. Their meetings became longer, their conversations sharper. Allen pushed for autonomy, while Reeves pushed back with the weight of ownership behind every word. The defining moment arrived during the 1965 season. The Rams were improving under Allen, yet the relationship between coach and owner was deteriorating faster than the team was rising. Disagreements over personnel escalated into open confrontation. Reporters noticed the tension, although few understood how deep the fracture had become. The breaking point came when Allen negotiated trades and roster changes without clearing every move through Reeves. To Allen, these decisions were necessary for winning. To Reeves, they were acts of defiance. The scandal erupted when Reeves fired Allen after a winning season. It shocked the league. Coaches were not dismissed after success. Coaches were not punished for building competitive teams. Yet Reeves believed his authority had been challenged in ways he could not tolerate. The firing became a national story. Players openly questioned the decision. Fans wrote letters demanding explanations. Allen remained composed in public, but those close to him understood that the betrayal left a lasting mark. The cold truth, carried by both men, was simple and painful. Reeves never forgave Allen for crossing boundaries he considered sacred. Allen never forgave Reeves for placing power above performance. That tension shaped the rest of Allen's career. It fueled his desire to control every detail at Washington. It informed his distrust of ownership. It hardened his belief that winning required total authority. The rivalry between George Allen and Dan Reeves did not end with the firing. It followed Allen through the years, a constant reminder of the price he paid for demanding control and the resistance he faced from those who believed the game belonged to them. Even decades later, those who knew both men understood that this was more than a workplace dispute. It was a clash of philosophy. It was a battle of identity. And it was the first hidden truth that defined the rise of George Allen. He never forgave Dan Reeves for taking away the team he built. And the grudge lived on. Edward Bennett Williams was a man who commanded every room he entered. Sharp, influential, politically connected, and fiercely strategic, he operated with the confidence of someone accustomed to winning battles far more complex than football games. When George Allen arrived in Washington, Williams believed he had found the perfect partner, a coach driven by discipline, a leader obsessed with preparation, a man who could restore pride to a franchise that had drifted through years of disappointment. For a time, their alliance looked unstoppable. In the beginning, their visions aligned. Williams wanted results and Allen delivered them. Veterans rallied behind Allen's strict structure, and the over-the-hill gang became a national storyline. Washington transformed from a struggling team into a contender that played with unity and purpose. Fans praised the discipline. National broadcasts highlighted the resurgence. Williams publicly celebrated Allen's leadership. Privately, he admired the coach's ability to turn an aging roster into a force capable of challenging any opponent. Yet, as the team improved, a familiar pattern began to reappear. The same desire for complete control that fueled Allen's earlier conflict with Dan Reeves emerged again. Allen wanted freedom in roster decisions. He wanted authority over player acquisitions. He believed that only he knew which pieces fit his demanding system. Williams, however, believed in balance between coach and ownership. He respected Allen's expertise, but he refused to surrender full control of the organization. The point of tension arrived when Allen pushed aggressively to acquire more veterans, trading draft picks with a confidence that unsettled the front office. Williams valued long-term stability. Allen valued immediate success. Each move became a negotiation. Each roster decision required delicate discussion. Their conversations grew longer and more pointed. Williams saw a coach who wanted to reshape the entire franchise according to his own philosophy. Allen saw an owner who underestimated the urgency of winning now. The iconic moment of fracture came during the 1976 season. The team was still competitive but aging rapidly, and the cost of Allen's roster choices was becoming clear. Williams confronted Allen about the heavy reliance on veterans and challenged his long-standing strategy of trading away future building blocks. For Allen, this was not criticism. It was an accusation that threatened his identity as a coach. For Williams, it was a necessary attempt to protect the future of the franchise. The tension became public when Williams decided not to renew Allen's contract. The announcement stunned the league. Washington had been a consistent contender under Allen. Fans questioned the timing. Reporters dissected every detail of the relationship. Yet the decision reflected a deep divide that had been forming for years. Williams believed that no coach, no matter how successful, could operate without accountability. Allen believed that interference in roster philosophy made long-term success impossible. The cold truth was unmistakable. Williams respected Allen, but he never trusted his willingness to sacrifice the future for the present. Allen admired Williams's intelligence, but he never forgave him for questioning the foundation of his coaching philosophy. Their fractured alliance defined one of the most successful yet turbulent periods in Washington's history. Even after leaving the franchise, Allen carried the wound with him. He built contenders, but lost battles with owners who believed their vision outweighed his. And this truth, the fourth hidden truth of his story, reveals a man shaped as much by conflict with authority as by the victories that filled his career. He never forgot that Williams chose the future over him, and that choice stayed with him until the end. George Allen believed that discipline was the backbone of greatness. To him, structure created clarity, and clarity created victory. Yet the very intensity that elevated his teams also provoked friction with players who felt the weight of his expectations, pressing against their own instincts and personalities. While fans admired his toughness, many players lived under the strain of a coach who demanded absolute focus, relentless preparation, and complete alignment with his vision. It was not a single player who rebelled. It was a pattern that revealed a deeper conflict between Allen's philosophy and the human limits of those he led. The tension began during his early years in Los Angeles, when younger players struggled with the precision he required. To Allen, every step mattered, every assignment mattered, every ounce of mental discipline mattered. For veterans, this approach offered structure. For younger teammates, it felt suffocating. Some players whispered that Allen did not trust talent. Others believed he cared more about film study than the emotional pulse of the locker room. He pushed them hard because he believed success demanded it. They pushed back because they believed no one could operate at that pace forever. The clash intensified in Washington when Allen's roster became a blend of hardened veterans and developing younger players. His veteran core thrived under strict routines. They had lived enough football to value predictability and structure. The younger players, however, resisted the intensity of his methods. One defining moment came during the 1973 season, when a group of players quietly confronted team leaders about the grueling practice schedule. They argued that Allen's workload left little room for recovery and feared it would shorten their careers. Word spread through the locker room and tension sharpened. The situation escalated when Allen discovered the dissatisfaction. Those close to him described the moment as a storm breaking inside the building. Allen saw rebellion not as critique, but as betrayal. He believed that questioning his methods meant questioning the foundation of the team. The practices did not ease. The meetings grew even longer. The players who had voiced concerns were pushed harder, evaluated more strictly, and sometimes benched in ways that made the message unmistakable. Allen expected loyalty. He expected obedience. He expected belief. The scandal broke when several players anonymously spoke to reporters about the demanding culture. The comments did not mention Allen by name, but everyone understood the implication. They described a coach whose intensity bordered on obsession. They described fatigue that lingered late into the season. They described a sense of walking on a narrow line where one misstep could cost a player his position. The story spread quickly, and for the first time the public saw the strain beneath Washington's disciplined exterior. The cold truth was that Allen's brilliance and rigidity were inseparable. He pushed his teams to heights they could not reach alone, but he also pushed them to breaking points. For every player who praised him, there was another who carried resentment. Some believed his methods extended their careers. Others believed his demands shortened them. The rebellion did not topple his system, but it revealed its cost. George Allen never admitted that his intensity fractured relationships. He believed the game rewarded discipline above all else. Yet, deep within his legacy lives the truth that not every player followed him willingly. Some followed him out of fear. Some followed him because there was no other choice. And this third hidden truth shows the price a team pays when greatness is built through relentless pressure. He never forgave the players who questioned his methods, and the divide between belief and rebellion defined a critical part of his rise. George Allen lived in an era of chalkboards instinct and obsessive film study. He believed the truth of football revealed itself only to those willing to spend countless hours rewinding the same play until patterns emerged from sheer dedication. To him, preparation was not just a method. It was identity. It was purpose. It was the dividing line between coaches who hoped to win and coaches who demanded to win. Yet, as the NFL entered the late 1970 and early 1980, a new current began to reshape the league. Younger coaches and front offices were exploring early forms of data-driven analysis. They questioned assumptions. They challenged traditions. They valued statistical trends as much as veteran intuition. And this shift collided directly with everything Allen believed. The tension began quietly. Younger assistants approached practices with clipboards full of data tracking tendencies and angles with methods far different from the film-heavy approach Allen trusted. To them, innovation meant finding hidden efficiencies. To Allen, innovation meant outworking opponents until exhaustion revealed the truth. The difference in philosophy was subtle at first, but unmistakable to anyone paying attention. As analytics gained traction, front offices grew more willing to push coaches toward new evaluation tools. Draft strategies evolved, player usage patterns shifted. Teams began experimenting with situational metrics to determine optimal play choices. Allen saw this movement as a threat. In his view, football could not be reduced to numbers. Football lived in the hearts of players in the instincts developed through repetition. He felt analytics undermined the human element he spent his life understanding. The conflict reached a turning point during his time as an executive and consultant after leaving Washington. Younger staffers presented analytical models recommending reduced workloads for aging players and strategic trade downs to accumulate draft capital. Allen rejected these ideas outright. He believed veterans offered reliability statistics could not measure. He believed trading away opportunities to acquire proven talent was a risk not worth taking. Meetings grew tense, voices tightened. Staffers later recalled that Allen rarely listened to models that contradicted his experience. One defining moment occurred during a private organizational session when an analyst suggested that Allen's long-standing preference for experienced players produced diminishing returns over time. The room fell silent. To challenge Allen's philosophy felt like challenging a pillar of the sport itself. Allen responded with a detailed explanation of leadership chemistry and mental readiness concepts he believed no spreadsheet could capture. The moment became symbolic. It represented not just a disagreement, but a widening gap between eras. The scandal emerged indirectly through media leaks, describing Allen as resistant to modern thinking. Some portrayed him as a relic of another time. Others framed him as a traditionalist, unable to adapt. The narrative stung because Allen believed the game was moving toward shortcuts. He felt analytics ignored the emotional weight of preparation. He saw the shift as a betrayal of the principles that had built champions. The cold truth was that the league had begun to evolve beyond the world Allen helped create. His methods produced success, but his refusal to embrace new tools isolated him. Younger staffs respected his past, but questioned his relevance. Allen never forgave the movement that dismissed the value of instinct and experience, and he never accepted that the game he loved was turning toward a philosophy that reduced passion to probability. This second hidden truth reveals a man at war with the future of football. A man who believed that if the sport ever surrendered its soul to numbers, it would lose the very essence that made it worth fighting for. George Allen built his entire identity on control. Control over preparation, control over roster choices, control over every second of practice and every heartbeat of the locker room. Yet, the greatest truth of his life was the one he kept closest. The truth about his final season at Long Beach State in 1990. To the public, it was a heartwarming comeback story, an old coach returning to the sideline to inspire young players and revive a forgotten program. But behind the surface lived a secret that revealed the deepest conflict inside him. He knew his body could no longer endure the pace he demanded, and he refused to admit it. Allen approached Long Beach State with the same relentless intensity he had carried throughout his career. He slept in his office during game weeks. He pushed players to prepare with the precision of professionals. He held meetings long after sunset because he believed that discipline was the greatest advantage a team could create. The players admired him. The school welcomed him. The media celebrated the unlikely return of a legendary coach. Yet those closest to him noticed signs the public could not see. He was exhausted. The demands he placed on himself had become heavier than the demands he placed on his players. Assistants recalled moments when he paused between drills to catch his breath. Others remembered evenings when he stayed in the office not because he needed more film study, but because he lacked the strength to walk to his car. Still, he refused to slow down. To him, slowing down meant surrender. Surrender meant accepting that time, the only opponent he had never defeated, was finally winning. The defining moment came after a cold and windy game late in the season. Allen walked off the field with the familiar pride of a coach who believed his team had fought with heart, but his body was failing. That night he developed pneumonia. The illness worsened as he continued preparing for the next game. When doctors urged him to rest, he dismissed the advice. To quit now would betray everything he believed about perseverance. He convinced himself that pushing through illness was no different from pushing through adversity. The tragedy unfolded quietly. Allen collapsed shortly after the season ended and passed away days later at 72. The news shook the football world. Fans mourned the loss of a coach who had reshaped the sport. Players remembered the lessons he drilled into them. Journalists highlighted his discipline and achievements. Yet, hidden beneath the tributes was the truth he never spoke aloud. He had driven himself beyond his physical limits because he did not know any other way to live. The scandal was not public, it was internal. The truth he hid was that his obsession did not stop when his body asked for mercy. Those who loved him had tried to warn him. Those who worked beside him had seen the decline. But Allen believed that the game defined him. Without it, he feared he would fade. By the time he realized that the price was too high, his body had already paid it. The cold truth is that George Allen's final season was both his triumph and his undoing. His greatest lessons came wrapped in sacrifice. His greatest flaw was the belief that commitment demanded suffering. And his greatest secret was the knowledge that he pushed himself past the point of no return, because he could not imagine a life lived at any other speed. There was one final truth that never made headlines yet, shaped George Allen more profoundly than any war with owners, players, or analysts. It lived behind closed doors, away from stadium lights and locker room meetings. It was the quiet conflict with his own family, a tension born from the same obsessive dedication that fueled his career. To the world, Allen appeared as a commander who always knew the next step. At home, he was a man torn between two loyalties: the game that consumed him and the family that waited for the rare moments he stepped away from it. His children admired him deeply. They saw a father driven by purpose and integrity, but they also saw a man who rarely stopped working, a man whose attention was often pulled toward film reels and scouting reports instead of dinner conversations. They grew up with the rhythm of seasons. Wins brought relief, losses brought silence. And through it all, they watched a man trying to balance devotion with absence. That struggle left marks that time alone could not erase. The defining moment of this hidden conflict came late in his career when his family staged a quiet intervention. They asked him to slow down. They asked him to rest. They asked him to choose health over obsession. Allen listened, but he did not change. Not because he did not love them, but because stepping back meant confronting a life without football, a life he could not imagine navigating. The cold truth was that Allen never fully resolved this divide. The game took more from him than the public ever understood. His family felt the cost most deeply, and this bonus truth reveals the human cost of a life lived in absolute pursuit of victory. It shows the burden carried not by the coach, but by those who loved him. When the 5 hidden truths of George Allen's life are placed side by side, they form a portrait far larger than any single rivalry, philosophy, or outcome on the field. Together they reveal a man who lived his entire life inside a storm of contradictions. He was both admired and feared, trusted and questioned, loved and resented. He built teams that reflected discipline and unity, yet he often walked alone. In many ways, Allen's story is not simply the story of a football coach. It is the story of a man who sacrificed everything to pursue absolute control over a world he believed could only be mastered through preparation. The conflicts with Dan Reeves and Edward Bennett Williams show the first layer of his legacy. These were not just disagreements between coach and owner. They were battles of identity. Reeves and Williams represented authority structure and tradition. Allen represented autonomy, conviction, and relentless belief in his own system. Each clash shaped him. Each fracture pushed him further into the idea that winning was possible only when he held full command. These confrontations defined how he approached every job that followed. They taught him that success came with a cost, and that trust was a luxury he could rarely afford. The rebellion within his own locker rooms revealed a second layer. His methods pushed players to heights they did not know they could reach, but they also pushed them to breaking points. He demanded discipline because he believed it created strength. He demanded obedience because he believed structure created clarity. Yet he seldom recognized the emotional weight these demands placed on the men who lived under them. The tension between his intentions and their experience became a thread woven through every team he led. It showed that brilliance and rigidity can exist together, but not without consequences. His war with modern analytics represented the third layer. As the league evolved, Allen found himself at odds with a movement that questioned the very instincts he had developed over decades. He saw the rise of quantitative thinking as a threat to the soul of the sport. Football, to him, lived in the heart and mind of the coach who understood its rhythms, not in charts and projections. His refusal to embrace analytics showed the depth of his conviction. It also revealed his vulnerability. He believed that if football drifted too far into numbers and probabilities, it would forget the human elements he spent his life mastering. Then came the truth of his final season, the truth that he hid even from himself. He returned to the sideline because he could not imagine life without the challenge, thrill, and purpose of coaching. Yet his body was no longer strong enough to absorb the weight of his demands. His final months at Long Beach State became a powerful symbol of his legacy. A man who had spent decades preaching discipline and preparation continued pushing forward even as illness closed in on him. His death at 72 was not simply the end of a career. It was the final expression of a life lived at full intensity. Behind all these layers lived the hidden conflict with his own family. The quiet truth that while Allen shaped organizations, rebuilt franchises, and inspired generations of players, he struggled to offer the same presence and balance at home. This tension humanized him. It revealed the cost of pursuing perfection. It showed that the victories celebrated by the public sometimes rested on sacrifices made by the people closest to him. When these truths converge, they form a powerful narrative. George Allen was a builder of teams, but he was also a builder of tension. He elevated everyone around him, yet demanded more than most could give. He changed the NFL by imposing structure on chaos. Yet he lived with internal chaos he never fully resolved. His legacy is not one of simple triumph. It is a tapestry woven from resilience, stubbornness, brilliance, and sacrifice. Beyond trophies and glory, his story is defined by the unseen battles that shaped him, the rivalries that hardened him, the beliefs that isolated him, the obsessions that drove him, and the losses that softened him only when it was too late to step back. George Allen did not simply leave behind a record of victories. He left behind a blueprint of how greatness and conflict can live side by side. He passed away in 1990 at the age of 72, leaving behind a legacy built on disciplined conviction and the cold truths that followed him throughout his life. His journey reminds us that even legends are shaped not only by what they achieved, but by the struggles they carried. The story of George Allen is not a simple journey from challenge to triumph. It is a chronicle of a man who pushed against every limit placed before him, and often against the limits he placed on himself. His rivalries shaped him, his convictions isolated him, his discipline elevated him, and his hidden truths followed him long after the final whistle faded into memory. These revelations remind us that greatness is rarely clean. It is forged through conflict, sacrifice, and choices that echo far beyond the field. Now the question becomes yours. Which of these truths surprised you most? Was it the power struggles that reshaped entire franchises? The quiet rebellion that simmered beneath his locker rooms? The battle between instinct and analytics? Or the heartbreaking reality of his final season? Each truth opens a new window into the life of a man who believed preparation could conquer any obstacle except the passing of time itself. If you found meaning in uncovering the forces that guided George Allen's rise and defined his legacy, then there is more to discover. Football's golden age is filled with men who carried their own hidden stories, rivalries that never healed, secrets that shaped dynasties, conflicts that changed the sport forever. These are the stories waiting to be revealed. If you want to continue exploring the untold history of the legends who built this game, subscribe to NFL Hidden Truths. Join a community dedicated to preserving the deeper narratives that shaped football's past. Share your thoughts in the comments and tell us which rivalry or revelation struck you the hardest. Your perspective keeps these stories alive. This is NFL Hidden Truths, where the legends of the game finally speak through the truths they left behind.